Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me, as always, is Ansgar Odinson.
Hey, good morning, folks.
And thank you all for joining us. I'm going to sit here and get my pen. I'm going to need to get my source of caffeine. Oh boy, yeah, I am unfortunately woefully undercaffeinated, but I'll deal with it.
And I have it on good authority that you kick puppies and hornets, according to Daniel Cooper, who is a good source.
Yeah, we will be discussing the ethics of puppy kicking and hornet kicking. For no particular reason, those rumors have all been unsubstantiated, and I dare anybody to come up with any proof of either of those things. The video with the puppies was just an unfortunate misunderstanding. So, yeah, thank you all for joining us. And we're going to be discussing today moral systems, and we're going to be using a number of superheroes, I think comic book superheroes, to sort of elucidate that and to discuss those systems. Batman and Captain America are two that, and no, this is not, before we have, and I am anticipating some difficulties in the live chat. I want to let our mods know if this descends into, because there has been in the community some significant issues, and there are two factions that have been getting really out of hand with each other, and so we want to keep this under control. The people who are DC versus Marvel need to be kept in check. I think we can have both here. We do have Batman, we do have Captain America. This can be done if the community could please just try to keep, we're Switzerland here. Okay, so Marvel works just fine. At any rate,
shots fired.
The charges of puppy kicking are about to just get, I think, a lot bigger. So,
were you a Marvel guy or a DC guy? Just curious.
I usually was a Marvel guy. There were certainly a number of DC. I was for Spider-Man, who happens to have been both. But Spider-Man, I kind of wanted to do the X-Men. I never got into the X-Men as much as I guess I could have. But Firestorm was also one of my favorites, and we discussed that one before. I was just a huge Firestorm fan. So we'll get into it. We have our Patreon meeting coming up. Oh God, the live chat's already exploding. Did Michael say Marvel sucks? And then right below that,
DC sucks. Yes,
DC sucks. All right, he's a
troublemaker. Shots in every direction. Yeah,
he's just sitting there in the middle. He's just like, so.
I guess he's a Dark Horse guy.
Yeah. So, what was I going to say? Patreon. We have our Patreon hangout coming up first Monday of every month, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. That will be coming up. Of course, now I found out that that conflicts with Caffeine Corner. It's like we're conflicting with just way too many people. So, but we will. That will be. I think that's this Monday because it's the first Monday of every month. I hope you guys will at least consider becoming patrons. The patrons, we are patrons, exclusively Patreon supported at the present time, and what. Really, for those Patreons, those of you who are good enough to support us, we sit, we talk, we shoot the shit. Sometimes we talk about the show. Sometimes we'll talk about kicking puppies or whatever else comes up.
Shows.
And we do have a tendency to listen. If you have an idea, if you have something you want to cover, a topic, whatever, bring it up. We'd love to hear from you, and that is where we get a lot of our ideas. So please do join us for that. And then I think, as we're sort of on top of the breaking news. Oh my God! Hopefully, there's not going to be any more. But the likelihood of that is we're going to have to. We were actually. Do you remember when we were on? It wasn't the Amateur Conversationalist, but it was something on the GDC. John Peterson was hosting it, and in the middle of the show, we had breaking news, and you and I were actually warming up the studio, getting everything done. We're like, and we were the featured show, so we're like trying to be good. He's talking. We're trying to be good. Interview subjects. He's talking all about us. We're like, okay, doing this. So we dropped it in the live chat. 5 minutes after the show, we're going live. He's like, wait. Are you guys? It's like, yeah, sorry.
Yep. Yeah, that was interesting. We had to. I mean, we're sitting there, we're having to be part of the show and engaged with the show. And in the back channels, we're like, okay, who's got OBS up? Okay, do you have the stream up on YouTube? And
that's right. I got the key. I passed 2 keys off to you. You put them in. Casters up because we're going to be simulcasting to the GDC, which means we're conflicting with him. It's like, sorry, bro, didn't mean to. It's breaking news, man. We've that's what we do. So yeah, that was interesting. So hopefully we're not going to interrupt our own show with breaking news, and hopefully we each get like a couple of days rest would be nice. But until that time, moral systems, Batman versus Captain America. Talk to me. What's going on? What do we got?
Okay. So we already did an earlier video where we kind of discussed how superheroes and supervillains and that sort of genre of comics touches on moral philosophy quite often. Today, we want to get into some more specifics. In fact, quite often, villains and heroes, you can almost see their interactions and their struggles as competitions between moral systems, because many of the villains, of course, are using moral systems in and of themselves. In fact, many heroes, I would think that, like, both Captain America and Batman would really be, and even some villains, embodiments of their moral systems. They're almost like if you turned the moral system into a character, that is the character, which I find really, really interesting. Villains are often not only embodiments of a moral system, but they are the consequence of taking a moral system to the absolute extreme, to the point where it becomes a harm, not a benefit. And then oftentimes, of course, you get conflicts between heroes because they have, competing moral systems and moral philosophies. And one of the first ones I wanted to kind of get into with you and get your take on it, because you know moral systems and the philosophy side far better than I do, is the Civil War. Now, most people know the Civil War movie, but I want to get more into the comics. Do you kind of have an idea of what happened in the comics? I'm just curious.
It's been a while. I do remember it, but it has definitely been a while, and I know because all my friends were talking about it, and everybody was involved in it. And then also my friends really like to play that Marvel game, which is you can still get, and you have to, midway through the game, you have to pick a side on the Civil War. So, but that's, I've got an understanding of it, and I've got some understanding of roughly how it's also different from the movies, but I'm not an expert.
Right. So one of the main things is that Iron Man, Tony Stark, he sides essentially with what we could call, I guess, the state, the government, which decided that anyone that had some sort of superpower not only needed to be registered, but their identities made public. So this would be the, equivalent to, having a gun registry, that not only did you have to register your gun, but you also had to be in a public registry. You couldn't, anyone could look up and know that, Nicholas Lamar Soutter owns a whatever specific gun. Only we're talking about inborn traits for a human being. You know what I mean? That sort of thing.
Well,
and
course, sometimes and ones that might ostracize you too as well. I mean, it's just sort of, it's stuff that you can't change about yourself, and so it strikes me as a form of doxing.
Yeah, it
really,
kind of feels that way. And of course, his idea was, it's for the good of, safety. This has to be known. If we're going to keep society safe, we need to know, because there's something to be said for, if a 6-year-old girl can level an entire city if she gets upset, that might be, something that the people who live anywhere near her might want to be aware of. Then, of course, Captain America, he was strongly opposed to this. He sided on individual liberty, individual freedom, and nobody should have to be the subject of this public, oh, we all know who you are and what you can do kind of thing. So why don't we start by breaking down the competing moral systems here?
All right. Well, so what we're going to be discussing is what's called normative ethics. Now, there's normative ethics and applied ethics. Applied ethics is the morality that you actually see us doing. It's a description of what you see in sort of everyday human behavior, and I think that's not what we're going to be discussing, because moral ethics doesn't really applied ethics doesn't tell you what we should do. Normative ethics is, it's an attempt to say this is a moral behavior. And the thing I find most interesting about these kinds of ethics and looking into it is we've never been able to come up with a single solution. And even when we can agree on a lot of sort of the structure of ethics, we can't agree on where it stems and what happens when you have two ethics that or two actions that would be perceived as noble, and they're in conflict with each other, where committing one noble or moral act will actually violate another one. And how you respond to that kind of situation is determined usually how you construct your ethical systems. So if we take any action that we're considering might be moral or not, you take a look at the act, and then you have to figure out, are we considering the act or the agent, the person doing it? Those are two different things. You can have, moral people doing immoral things, immoral people, so on and so forth. So is our morality based on the agent or based on the act itself? So if we're talking about the act, the question becomes usually either what are the characteristics of that act or what are the consequences of that act. Now, I, for one, happen to be what's called a consequentialist. And there are many flavors of consequentialists. And one such flavor is utilitarianism, which is what most people have. And I mean, I have, it's not sort of a strict utilitarianism, and we can get into sort of the more, well, I don't think we need to get into the nuance of it, actually. But I tend to be towards utilitarianism, which most ethical systems do include some kind of appeal to utilitarianism. What is the greatest good for the greatest number? And utilitarianism usually just says the act is justifiable and is considered moral if it has the greatest good for the greatest number. Sam Harris is one that I really like, who has sort of a version of utilitarianism. If the characteristics are good, it usually, we're talking usually something like denotology or something like that. And in denotology, denotology is, I'll get into that one in a second. So when we're talking about the agent, the person, the question is, A, are they acting, what are their intentions? Are they trying to do the good thing or not? This is where it gets into what happens if you have good intentions, but you do something that's terrible. Where does the morality lie there? Utilitarianism might approach that in one way. Any kind of ethical system based on the agent says, look, if you were doing your best to be good, then it was moral. It doesn't matter if 1,000 people died. You were trying to do the right thing. You did it to the best of your ability. You were moral. And then character.
In that kind of a thing, I was going to say, so in that kind of a thing, a villain that we would technically classify a villain that really was trying to do their best to do the right thing, but took something to an extreme, would still be considered moral in that framework?
It depends on, because the question is, so I mean, there are two questions I think that we're asking here is, one, what are their moral systems? How are they thinking about it? And then two, how are we judging it? So would I consider it moral? Well, again, I'm more of a utilitarianism or a consequentialist. Again, one is a subset of that, but for me, and I do take, but I consider, and here's the other thing, which is I consider in part of that calculation, what is the intent, and was the intent able to? Because here's the question: if I make an act that I think will have the greatest good for the greatest number, but fails to, and I failed in that utilitarian math, in a strictly utilitarian system, what I did was wrong. But if I did my best to uphold the utilitarian model, okay, now I'm acting as either a kind of, essentially virtue ethics. But so they can inform each other. They don't necessarily work in a vacuum. But the question is, what principally do you think the goal should be? So it depends on a lot more. I'd want to get into specifics of them, but there are moral systems whereby, yes, what you just said is perfectly sound, and you could have, and in fact, a lot of also tragic heroes, especially in Greek mythology. Othello, was undone by his own moral system, and so was Macbeth, actually. So in terms of where the agent is relevant, it's either intentions or the character of the agent. Is the agent a knight, for example, who's always trying to follow certain virtues, whatever their intention is? This is also something you'll see in a lot of movies and things like that, where you will have a character who has a very specific code that they will follow, and they will always stick to that character. This tends to be what's called virtue ethics. I have a virtue. I am always honest. No matter what, I am always honest. Okay, well, if I come up and I say, well, did you cheat on your taxes? Yes, I did. I didn't mean to, but I did. I am now being honest about it. I didn't have integrity because I cheated on the taxes, but I'm now being honest. Okay. So fine. Well, now, did you see your best friend doing something that he shouldn't have done? I'm always honest. Yes. He's still a good guy. Please don't you threw him in jail. Now, even if I know that the consequences to him for those actions may not be appropriate, am I going to be honest? Am I going to care about the honesty more than the consequences to him for that honesty? Which is more important? So this gets into what I said earlier. It's we're asking, what do you do, especially when different ideals conflate? How do you resolve them? And that gets into your ethical system. So the three basic normative ethical systems that I think we should talk about are virtue ethics, which says that you align yourself with certain virtues: honor, compassion, humility. I've actually seen someone sacrifice. Whatever those are, usually any combination of those. So that is literally the embodiment of the medieval knight. He's always going to follow certain rules, no matter what, no matter the consequences to him, no matter the consequences to anybody. That's what he's going to do. That's called virtue ethics. Utilitarianism, consequentialism, is the other one that focuses on the consequences of an act. So were the consequences better than not? And unfortunately, then you do have to ask the question, how are you going to judge what's good and what's not? Is it what's more pleasurable for people? Is it what gets people more money? Is it what increases their lifespan? Listen, I can increase every human being's lifespan if I throw them all into a really nice confined space where they can't come into contact with each other, they can't share bodily fluids, and everything's hypoallergenic, and you're living under a. But guess what?
Came up with a great idea for a supervillain right there.
I just did, actually.
Taking a moral ethic to an extreme.
That's actually that was Isaac Asimov's iRobot, where the robots have been instructed to always protect us, and they decide to protect us from ourselves by enslaving us. So, which is very similar, I think, to a couple you have. So that again, that is consequentialism, and finding whatever is, and the utilitarianism is a subset of that, which is just the greatest good for the greatest number. But at any rate, so there's virtue ethics, consequentialism, and deontology. Deontology is a focus on duties. So you say there are certain duties we are obligated to not cause unnecessary harm to another person. So that might be a duty. We have a duty to our fellow man. We have a duty to our government or our state or our society. We have a duty to, and again, a knight might have some duties if they've, pledged fealty to, but again, for them, it's still their virtue ethics. So this would be, and I think I already thought of a few examples, I think, of where deontology is going to come up. Oftentimes, people who are religious, okay, you have a duty to what God says you need to do. So God outlines for you your moral and ethical system, and that you will follow. You're not taking a virtue for the sake of that virtue. You're taking the duties as given to you by God. Now, there are other duties. John Stuart Mill came up with.
Samurai would be a great example of this.
Yes, and where they would violate all the others for do whatever they have. Yep, I think that's perfect. Mm-hmm. So, the John Stuart Mill came up with the harm principle. No act can be made illegal unless it can be demonstrated to cause harm to another person. But that was based on a duty to prevent harm and to not cause harm. One of the most famous ones that I would stick in deontology is do unto others as you would have done to yourself. That is a duty to each other to not inflict upon them anything you would not. So that's deontology.
Right.
So that's it. Deontology, consequentialism, and virtue ethics. Those are the three systems that I think we're going to be talking about. And again, there's like dozens of subsets and how you break them apart, but I don't think we're going to go there. I think that's a bad idea.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think this is a fascinating topic already. So in the Civil Wars I described, where would Captain America be? Would he be virtue? What would he be?
Yeah, I would take it as so now wait a minute. Now what was the motivation you said? Because it's in part on what's motivating him.
Yeah, he was protecting. I would say that Captain America. He looks at things like the Constitution and the spirit of what the Constitution was supposed to be, and that is his. Those are his. I guess you could call them virtues. Those are what he wants to protect. So individual liberty is very, very important, and what is right, what is just, what is what is going to protect, individual freedom, and, the right to the pursuit of happiness. Also, obviously, that we all have the right to privacy, things like that. Versus you have, you had Iron Man who was like, well, no, we need to keep people safe,
All right, so for Captain America, I mean, if he was strictly going by the Constitution, actually, I would say, okay, that's deontology, but it actually sounds like for him it's virtue ethics. So what he's saying is freedom is a virtue. So he goes in parallel with I think it sounds to me like he thinks the Constitution sort of embodies these virtues, but these virtues exist. He's not following the commandments of the Constitution. He's following these virtues of freedom, of liberty, of taxation without representation. At any rate,
that's the right to self-determination. That's probably a big one for him.
So he's a virtue ethicist. He cares more about the actual virtues and he's willing to, again, if he's in conflict and if there's situations where he can't really tell, he is going to rely on his virtues. Again, not necessarily the consequences. Consequences may be damned. It's the virtues that he cares about.
Right. If people have to, it's better to, it would be better to let bad things happen, I think, in his mind, than to, violate those virtues. He kind of really embodies the, yes, we saved these people or we did this thing, but can we live with ourselves? You know what I mean? Is really what I feel from Captain America. He said those kinds of things before. In this particular instance, Tony Stark, however, he is very much saying that there is a safety concern. The society at large has to be concerned. And if your individual liberty or your right to privacy is going to potentially get people killed, you know what I mean? And he also felt that people have a right to know. You have a right to know that you're living next to potentially a nuclear bomb. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that trumps that nuclear bomb's right to privacy and self-determination. So
Well,
yeah.
so if we were to focus on that kind of rights element, that would be deontology. So that would be, listen, we all have a right to know these things, and my right to my privacy and my safety empowers me to compel you to tell me these things, because whether you can control it or not, whether you have privacy or not, I have that. So that smacks of deontology. But actually, thus far, you sound a lot more like what you're talking about is consequentialism. So here's the problem. If we don't act in a certain way, a lot of people are going to die. So screw the freedoms. Freedoms are great, but there has to be a limit to those if we're going to protect everybody and if we're going to save lives. So he's bordering on. I think you can make a case for either. Actually, now that I think about it too, because that still actually gets back to, if he thinks the duty is to save and protect lives, then it's deontology. If he feels compelled to do that, and that's his goal, that's
Right.
deontology. If he thinks that really we just have to help as many people as possible, is some form of consequentialist.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's really interesting is if you really read the comics with these moral systems in mind, you can really see where every conversation they're having, the arguments they're having, even the physical fights that they have, are really artistic representations of moral conflict and even a little bit of debate. You know what I mean? And I think that I find that's what I find most fascinating about comics is people, like we talked about in a previous show, are learning about ethical systems and they don't even know that they're learning about ethical systems. You know what I mean?
That's one of the things. So the Avengers in particular, there are all sorts of different groups. Most of these groups don't end up fighting amongst themselves, but the Avengers, they'll fight each other all the time.
Oh yeah.
It's a melee about. But again, you have good sides, people who are on sort of good side. They're each on a different side of. And actually, I think we had said, I'm going to dive into it. I'm going to dive into it for 1 second, which was Batman versus Superman, because in the original, in the Dark Knight,
Yes.
which I love. I've got that actually over here, and that's the alternate universe. It was just a single. It was just a single thing. Ronald Reagan has started World War III. And so you've got Batman, who's got one set of goals, and Superman, who is basically being used by the government. And they both have ethical systems, and they're in fact friends. But the problem is they're now found in conflict. Batman, Batman is being a very strong virtue ethicist, and Superman in that one is a deontologist, because he's doing what he's being told to do by the government, because he feels that this is how we're going to get through it, is by a centralized government who's going to tell us what to do, and I am the agent of that. Where Batman's like, no, we come first as individuals. And that's where the two of them find themselves in conflict. If I remember it correctly, you probably know it better than I do.
What I love about Batman is his moral system is almost identical to Captain America's. The difference between him and Captain America, though, is he believes that it is a moral good to violate his own ethics, to compromise his own character for the good of others. That's the difference.
Okay, so, and I think that's actually, and I would actually put that in consequentialism, and that's because that is sort of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. He will sacrifice his own needs if that's what's needed for everybody else, to help the greatest benefit, to provide the greatest benefit to people. He will do anything else. That's almost the consummate consequentialist.
Yeah. And that's what I think one of the things that makes him such a interesting character is character-wise, he is the stand-up, you know what I mean, knight in shining armor kind of character, but he sees the necessity of compromising who he is as a moral agent for the sake of saving people. And I think that makes him incredibly complex and incredibly interesting, quite honestly. You know, he kind of he recognizes that what he's doing is not the right thing, but he's doing it for the right reasons.
Well, it's certainly a violation of, say, deontology. I mean, he's not, Batman is working against the law. He is working against, which, and again, the law ostensibly exists for the common good. And even he's not against. He's not just sitting there going, well, I'm only going to be against immoral laws. He's against plenty of laws. He'll do whatever the hell he wants. But obviously, society couldn't survive if everybody did that. If everybody just went around breaking any old laws, they couldn't. They could not. Society couldn't function. So one of the things that Kant did is he came up with what's called the moral imperative. But Kant was a utilitarianist, and one of the things that he had said was that you can figure out whether or not an action is moral or immoral just on this very simple principle, which gets complicated quickly, actually. But could society function if everybody did this? If the answer is no, it's immoral. If the answer is yes, it's moral. So lying. If everybody in society lied all the time, could society function? No. Ergo, lying is immoral. So that was sort of now.
Interesting.
If everybody acted like Batman all the time, if
no,
so this is a violation of the Kantians, the Kantian view of ethics, because no, society could not function if we were empowered this way. Ergo, Batman is immoral. And there are plenty of people who do think that, Batman was a criminal. Every what he's doing, he should be doing. But this is where I think it starts to get interesting.
Well, it's interesting because Batman sees himself as immoral, but he sees himself as it being necessary, if that makes sense. And
yes.
Yeah. So what I also want to touch on a little bit on villains, because villains are really interesting. Especially the best villains always take a moral ethic to the absolute extreme. Dr. Doom has done this. Mr. Freeze has certainly done this. Mr. Freeze, his wife, protecting his wife is everything to him. Nothing else matters. He will destroy anything in his way. And he's a doctor. He wants to save people, but he will destroy anything in his way to protect his wife. But one of my favorites is Ultron, and he's been in the MCU recently, but I don't think they did him justice. What's really interesting is Ultron was designed for prison reform. He was there to reform reform criminals. He was there to help bring about their being reintroduced into society. And so he had prime directives, you know what I mean? And one of those prime directives was to try and end crime and end suffering and end criminal violence. And the way he decided that, the only method of achieving his goal in a 100% capacity was to end humanity. So that was kind of an interesting one.
Yeah.
What would be his moral system there?
It ain't consequentialism. We could take that off the table. It ain't consequentialism. So it depends on how or why. If he's acting this way and he's aware that he's acting this way because he was programmed and because this is his job and he will fulfill his job, that's what he's there to do. It's deontology, because he is following based on instructions that he has been given that he is deemed moral just by fiat. If he's doing it because he understands that if it's, and also I suppose to some extent would be whether or not he's self-aware. If he's aware that the value, I mean, what is his goal? Is his goal to, if his goal is to reform them for its own sake, because reforming them is a good, then he would lead towards virtue ethics. But I don't think. It sounds like it's deontology. It sounds like, look, he was just told that this is the absolute good.
Yeah.
Yep. I did want to point out something, just because we were talking about Batman, and again, to get into Kant, what would happen if we all acted like Batman?
Right.
Okay. So now in quantum physics, there is particles, and these particles are in various different states. And when a particle is observed, the probability state of that particle, where it may be, collapses. Poof, the particle is locked into one position. Now, many people understand this as Schrodinger and Schrodinger's cat, where you would have a cat that's in a box. Until you observe the cat, it is actually both dead and alive at the same time. When you pop open the lid, you snap, boom, one reality into existence. But and this happened in a Star Trek episode where they talked about this exact thing, where there is a theory that both realities are actually true. And what happens when you open the box isn't that suddenly the cat becomes alive or the cat becomes dead. The cat was actually both dead and alive. What's snapping into position isn't that reality. It's you in a specific reality path. And so what's happened is you open the lid, poof, the cat is dead, but there was another reality where the cat was alive, and there is another you that is existing in that path. And the only one that you're aware of is whichever one you locked into, but somebody else locked into another one. And for every possible act, there's an infinite number of other acts, and all of those acts are actually occurring in alternate universes everywhere. What this means is that somewhere out there in an alternate universe, you, Ansgar, are Batman. Just saying.
Sweet.
All right. So long road to a very short joke. We're all Batman. Somewhere we are all actually Batman in an alternate somewhere. So all of you, we can all just enjoy that in an alternate reality.
Now I need to see a picture of Batman with a top hat, because that'd be awesome.
Somebody, we should have a contest. Yep. Okay. And Mr. McGinnis is accusing me of killing cats. So it's puppies, cats, and hornets.
Yes, you kill cats and you kick puppies and hornets.
To be fair, I didn't kill the cat. It was whoever opened the lid killed the cat. But at any rate, cat was perfectly fine when I put him in the box with the poison.
That reminds me of being a parent. You know, it was fine when I was last in the room. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's what the kids.
Yeah.
All right, so we just covered Ultron, and
so okay, if you were going to design a villain, right, like you were going to embody a moral system and design a villain to take that system to the extreme, what kind of a villain would you design? Well, I'm just curious.
Oh wow, what kind of villain? Well, I would try to find a really good virtue that for the most part universally is considered, and I think it would be hard to do it with a virtue like charity. But take, I mean, Robin Hood, by the way, I mean, he's okay. So, he's got a virtue of charity, but he's doing it by stealing. But again, ostensibly, that's perfectly okay. I would try to, I would try to find a virtue that I think is universally accepted as good. And yes, try to find it I mean, the Punisher isn't necessary. I mean, in my view, he's actually sort of going along close to that one. Anybody who really is going to try to force everybody to live by, there's a reason there's like 3 different basic normative ethics and then 20 different subsets. It's because none of these work. They all work reasonably well, but there's exceptions to all of them, and we can't find one where we can sit there and just say, oh, there's the answer. It's not like 2 + 2 = 4. We haven't been able to do that, and philosophers are still working on it, but we haven't been able to do that. So because there's nuance, because if you try to force, if you become a very strong deontologist or a very strong virtue ethicist for just one, or even, and I think you had an example, even a consequentialist, where it's like, you know what, Uh, uh, um, in the Avengers movie, Thanos actually was essentially a consequentialist. He's like, you know what? In my view, the best thing for everybody in the universe is for me to kill 50% of the people in the universe, 50% of all life. That's the best. That's the best thing. That's the consequence I'm looking for. So it's a consequentialist, believe it or not. So yeah, just take something like that, a consequentialist value, and make it so extreme and force everybody into it. Say, I will force you to see things my way. That's what I would.
Magneto be a consequentialist?
Would Magneto be a consequentialist? Well, he's primarily motivated, I think, by revenge.
No,
But
no,
if we take
no.
out,
He is primarily motivated to like end the oppression of mutants. That's his primary motivation. And he's willing to even sacrifice a few mutants along the way if it's better for all the other mutants.
well, he's so I like to sort of relate him to Malcolm X. And to say whether Malcolm X was necessarily motivated by revenge, I don't think I would say that, but he was motivated largely by a sense of terrible injustice done onto him and trying to rebalance
Yeah.
that. And then he continued that until his. So, what would Magneto? I mean, I think I would probably actually put them in consequentialism, and I think the reason is because I think there isn't an overall virtue. I don't think Malcolm X or Magneto would be sitting there going, "Well, the virtue is honesty, integrity, it's compassion." I don't see a virtue that you could say that they have as a guiding light. I don't think it's the ontology. He's not, he doesn't feel compelled to do this out of a single duty anywhere. But I do, except for, well, it could be deontology if the duty that he's feeling is to mutants themselves. If he's saying, I have a duty to protect my fellow mutants, that could be deontology. But I might put him as a consequentialist, and what he thinks is best is humans stay on one side, mutants stay on the other side, and that is best for everybody. The greatest good will be achieved for the greatest number if we accept the fact that mutants are superior, Homo sapiens are inferior, and we're not going to treat them terribly. We're not going to treat them like slaves, but they need to learn their place. We know our place. Everybody stick to it.
I'm curious. You said you never really got into X-Men, which I'm surprised by, because I think that you really get into morals and ethics and philosophy when you get into the struggle between Professor Xavier and Magneto. Those are some really interesting comics. I would guess that what Professor X would probably be in consequentialism as well. He's trying to do the greatest good for the most amount of people.
Virtue ethicist. Okay. So he believes in a universal virtue of compassion, of people getting along together, of people working together. He doesn't even necessarily see it as a duty. He's not upholding his duty to mankind or anything. He is absolutely a virtue ethicist. And he's got these virtues that we should always adhere to, and they are virtues that elevate us as people. That's a virtue ethicist. He's the definition of a virtue ethicist. He's spectacular in that respect, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really find interesting, because superheroes, they're allowed to be in the comics we can take a person to the extreme. You know what I mean? We can exaggerate, and so people end up becoming can be really pillars of their ethical system in a big way. By the way, somebody did ask us, what superpower would you want if you could have any superpower?
I think flight. I've always liked that one. I think flight would be my favorite. I thought about like telekinesis and teleporting, all this. No, flight.
Well, I mean, telekinesis, you could learn to fly eventually. Just saying.
Okay. The power I want is the power to have all powers, and because in my girls is the way my girls do. I've seen them the way that's a power. That is absolutely. If you have one power,
Reality
my powers
alteration.
have all the powers.
Yeah, reality.
Yeah, exactly. I can manipulate reality so that I can do anything and be anything, and yeah.
If I had to just pick one and be more locked in, I would have like the super healing. You know, always healthy, always strong, always in perfect condition. Yeah, that'd be
Wolverine.
mine.
So yeah,
Yep.
okay, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never in my mind even been a question. Nobody has ever come up with one I'd prefer to flight. I don't know, something about being able to just go wherever you want, be able to just observe everything, and be able to just I've always loved that. I don't know.
That'd be cool.
So,
That'd be
that's a
way
good
cool.
question.
Would you be a hero or a villain?
I'd like to think I'd be a hero. The only problem is with flight. I mean, it's like with super healing, you can be a hero. You know, with like invisibility, you could be a hero. You know, you could turn invisible, sneak up behind the bad guy, and just bonk him on the. There's also with flight, it's sort of like yes, you can fly to the bank. Now you got a problem. You know, I mean, I suppose if you're in flight with a flak vest and a helmet and all this other stuff, maybe you can be a hit. But it's like I can't with telekinesis. You can be a hero. You can be a hero with all those other ones. With flight, it's like, well, I can get to work really quickly. That's my superpower. I don't need 25 cents for the bus. It's a travel superpower. That's about it.
Okay. One last silly question before we get back into some more serious stuff, just to lighten the mood. What would be the moral system of the Tick?
Lunacy. I haven't actually watched it. I'm sure there probably actually is one. I just have no idea what to. And ethics was never. Sorry, in terms of branches of philosophy, epistemology and metaphysics have been my two favorites. Ethics was just like, what does it take to make a philosopher fall asleep? In my view, it's ethics. I could be wrong. There are plenty of people who, Alistair McIntyre and a bunch of others who do. I never found it, so I'm not the best ethicist for many reasons, I think. But we'll keep the some of those reasons. Just I know what you're thinking. I can see Ansgar's face. He's like, yeah, if only people knew. That's enough, Ansgar. Let's get back to the main topic at hand.
Yeah. You sure about that? I think we need to talk more about how you kill kittens.
Oh Jesus, yeah. Well, so we did have. So I don't know if you wanted to go into that or if we wanted to do, because we had a question on the live chat I did want to hit into, and we could talk about a bit. Yes, which was about the Watchmen, which is an interesting.
Very popular.
I never really got into it. I never got into X-Men, I think, because I think you only get into what you're exposed to, and a lot of my friends did it, but none of them were able to turn me on to the X-Men. The Watchmen, I was never turned on to too much because I think they were too dark. And I think there was just all of them. There wasn't anyone in there. Most of them I couldn't find redeeming in one way or another. I should say that. A number of the characters, a number of the superheroes in the Watchmen I couldn't find redeeming. But there were a few that, and and I would love to see people in the live chat who have actually, people who could, I guess I agree with Nick, ethics as a philosophy major, ethics is sleep inducing. Yeah. Wow. At any rate, so if anybody in the live chat also knows this, I'm not an expert on the Watchmen, but it is funny. Osmandius, Ozzy, who is the philosopher that we had on, and he didn't get his name from Osmandius in the series, and thank God. But someone did his image as Osmandius, and people keep calling it because he goes by Osmandius. So the Watchmen is in an alternate universe. It was just a limited series, and it was about a bunch of superheroes who did actually work usually for the U.S. government. They went to Vietnam and they helped out there, yada, yada, yada. But they're very dark characters, and they don't always do the right thing. And so there's this, who watches the Watchmen? And but they really embody a lot of very strong ethical systems. Now, the most powerful of them is called Dr. Manhattan. He's so powerful, it's almost ludicrous. But he's difficult, and I think I want to stay away from, because he starts leaving humanity. He gets distance from humanity and almost doesn't have any ethics at one point. He's not against anything, but he's not for anything. He's just sort of existing. There are a couple others. There's a guy called the Joker, and he's doesn't live very long in the series, and certainly isn't a good guy. But a couple of the ones that people are fascinated by is Rorschach. Rorschach has a hood on his head, and it changes with a Rorschach pattern. So there's always this kind of butterfly and whatever else. And he is he does have some very specific virtues that he believes have to be upheld at all costs. Honesty, for example, is one of them, and he is the epitome of let justice be done, though thy heavens fall. But it was also let the truth be known, though thy heavens fall. He was like, it is worth nuking the planet to tell the truth, and he would risk nuclear war if there was nuclear war that hinged on a single tiny lie. It was averted, and it's basically what happens in the series. Nuclear war is averted by a single lie, and he's like, "Oh shoot, that was a shame. I guess we're all gonna die because we gotta be honest. This is who we are. We're superheroes. This is what superheroes do. We tell the truth." So he's the most honest and most virtuous of all of them. But there's another one. Ozymandias is the smartest of all of them. Extraordinarily intelligent, super fast, does all these other things. And what he discovers, and you don't find this out until the end, spoiler for anybody who doesn't know, just spoiler, I know there's a new series. Spoiler, big spoiler. Somebody is killing off all of the Watchmen. Somebody's killing off all of these heroes, and nobody knows why. And he's trying to figure out who's doing it and why. And just towards the end, you figure out he's the one who's doing it, and you don't know why, but he's killing off the Watchmen. So the remaining Watchmen go to confront him, and as they do, there's a nuclear detonation in Manhattan. And it's not really a detonation. There's like an alien takeover, but it depends on whether you're in the movie or the show. But there's massive casualties in the city of Manhattan, New York, devastated, millions dead, and he engineered it, and he did this attack. Now, the Watchmen tried to confront him with it and say, "We're going to take you in." He goes, "No, here's why I did it. I did it because we're on the brink of war." Now, nothing unifies people more than having a common enemy. Right now, the U.S. and Russia are fighting each other, and they're about to end civilization as we know it. But if we have a common enemy, so I faked an alien invasion. Aliens are here. We're going to unify to fight the aliens, and this will save the human race. I murdered millions of people because it was the only way to save the human race. And so now all of them are stuck in this thing. It's already been done. They can't undo it. Nobody can bring these people back. He is right. It has the consequences that he was looking for, which is to end this. The U.S. and Russia come out together, condemn the attack, and say, and in the movie, it's actually Manhattan that takes the fall, but it's whoever it is that takes the fall. The world unites and says, we were about to kill each other. We were about to end all life, but nope, we're going to go after the bad guys. And so now, is what he did moral? He killed loads of people. He was successful in the consequences, but could he have possibly known that? And then what do you do if you're one of these people? You now know the truth. This was faked. You know there's someone guilty of it. What happens if you tell people? What happens if you tell people that it was fake? Do we go back to and then this is where Rorschach comes in, because Rorschach is like, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell everybody because you lied and you murdered people, and I don't care what your intentions were. And his intentions, again, wasn't a virtue. It was the goal. It was the consequence. So he is this ultimate consequentialist. I'll kill anybody. I'll kill as many people. And he killed many of his friends. He was going after the Watchmen because he knew they'd figured out So he was killing anyone who might figure out what he was doing. So here he is. He did loads of bad actions, presumably for a good consequence, and he didn't benefit from it. He wasn't, and he sacrifices a lot for this. Is he a good guy? Is the people who want to rat him out and tell everyone, are they good guys or bad? That's, and the watch, I know I'm distilling the Watchmen into, it is far, far more complicated than that. And we should probably do an entire show on it, although I'm certainly not qualified. But
we'd have to bring in somebody else. Yeah, I wasn't. I've read the Watchmen, but I wasn't. It's been a long time, and I haven't really. I haven't watched any of the movies, and I really wasn't that into it because as much as I find the Watchmen fascinating because it's so deep and rich. Usually, I'm an escapist when it comes to comic books. I really want like heroes and villains, and the Watchmen wasn't that. It was really twisted and dark in a way that that's just not me for me when it comes to superheroes. It's funny because I'm really into twisted and dark shit everywhere else. I don't know, it's weird. But yeah,
I think you hit on it for me too. Yeah, no, that makes a lot. I think you're right. I'm an escapist too. I think when it comes to it, and I think that's what it's the reason I go to the movies. I don't want to, I don't know, but no, that's a good point.
Yeah, I watch the nightly news, and there's rape and murder and theft and all these horrible things that happen all the time. When I go to superheroes, I want to feel like there's somebody that can just fly in and it's all fixed now. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm making it sound a little more simple, but yeah.
It's I think it's like escapist fantasy, and if you're escaping into the world of the Watchmen, I don't think we're going to be friends. I don't want to know you. I don't want to know your problems. I don't want to, if that's your escapist. If you find it entertaining and interesting and engaging, that's one thing. But if that's your escapist fantasy, you do you. Good luck with all that.
Yeah. No, but what I do find fascinating about it is it does really take the concept we were just talking about, where you're taking a basically what you would call a moral debate, and you're artistically representing it in a fight on the pages. You know what I mean? And I that's what one of the aspects of comics that I find very, very fascinating is you can literally take moral debates and arguments about moral philosophy and moral systems, and you put them onto the pages, and suddenly they're an entertaining superhero story.
Well, I think, and I've gotten this as a writer too, because I get this kind of shit all the time because a lot of what I write is fiction. And I think I'm better at the nonfiction. I enjoy both, but I do get, and so this happened in the movie Sideways, and people are like, nobody would ever say that. I get this all the fucking time. Like, oh, what's your book about? It's like, oh, it's a rebuttal to Atlas Shrugged. It's a story about, oh, wait, it's a story, so it's not, it's a novel. It's fiction. So yeah, it's a novel. Oh, I don't read novels. You know what? There's enough happening in real life. I don't need to learn about it. I don't need to engage on that. It's just like, why not read real things? I'm sitting there going, well, it depends, I guess, on how you define real. The reality is there's things that you can say in a novel, in a graphic novel, in a comic book that you cannot say or do in the confines of reality or haven't been done. And you can explore things that can't be. Science fiction is a great tool for that. 1984 was science fiction, and it was able to explore things that we can't easily explore in the world we are in, but that nonetheless are very important to understand. So I think that's why
I think
I agree with you 100%. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, in fact, in science fiction and fantasy, one of the great things about it is we can explore the consequences. I mean, brutal, horrible consequences of moral systems, of actions, of ideas, of whatever we want, even technologies, without there being any real human cost. We can do this all in thought experiments.
Yep, I think that's a great way to put it too, is thought experiments. I think it's marvelous. I think that culture and entertainment is actually a huge part of who we are. It's got a tremendous amount of value. I think a lot of people sort of try to start to only value. I remember when I first started programming, I started programming games, and the assistant principal came up to me and said, I've heard you're really good at programming. What are you making? A new word processor, a new this? I said, no, games. It's like, games, those are worthless. Oh, I thought you'd do something good with your talents. I'm saying, going, dude, without games of some kind, and whether it's without entertainment, life is really kind of meaningless. And it's important. It's, finding an outlet for your aggressions, for your hostilities, for your fantasies, whatever. Whether it's games, whether it's reading, is hugely underestimated. So, yeah, all right. So where else are we? How are we doing on this?
Well, so I think we've covered the main moral systems. We've covered quite a few different superheroes, even some super villains. We've covered a little bit about the Watchmen, and I think, like you said, I think we've got the right person, and they would make an incredible show, to be quite honest. And we're
Ozzy, actually, we should reach out to Ozzy for that one, because I've spoken to Ozzy. He's seen it, and he knows it reasonably well. I don't know how well. He knows it a lot better than I do. And I was just started talking about some moral systems of these guys, and he's just like, "No, Nick." Boom, boom, boom. I was like, "Whoa, okay, yeah." Anyways, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, let's bring in Ozzy for that one. That'd be fantastic. Discussing moral systems and moral philosophy within the Watchmen, because that is a really rich series of comics to do that in. You know what I mean? A really rich graphic novel to do that in. But I think we can start wrapping up. We do have tomorrow. We will be talking about the art monopoly. We're going to be talking about Disney quite a bit, but which touches on something you just said. With fiction having so much value to our culture, I think it's important to discuss how business monopoly and how large business gobbling up all these small studios, what does that mean to the future of our culture? You know what I mean? How does that affect our culture? I think that's going to be an important discussion. So that's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Oh wait, no, is that tomorrow? Is that next week? Let me make absolutely sure so I
think
don't
it's tomorrow, but let's.
Yes, that's tomorrow. Excuse me. Yes, next week is when we're doing the other. Okay, yeah. So tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow for Disney and the Art Monopoly. And anything you wanted to add before we?
No, I think that's it. So, thank you all for joining us. Again, actually, don't forget, of course, we will be having our Patreon hangout this coming Monday. We've got a number of new Patreons that I'm looking forward to. They're going to be joining us. In fact, even a guest or two has decided to become a Patreon, which is always immensely flattering. So thank you for those of you who have supported us. Thank you, those of you who have become members. And you can always reach also Ansgar and myself on Twitter. Ansgar has not heard of this Facebook thing. He knows it's a thing, but he doesn't know what the thing is.
I know it's the kind of thing I like hitting with a hammer. Yeah.
Facebook. Yeah. No, I'm not saying you put the book on. Okay. At any rate. But thank you all. You can always, reach out to us, and we look forward to hearing from you guys. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. So thank you for joining us.
See ya.